Welcome to the Business Trendsetter podcast, where we talk about trends and how to use them to grow your business. My name is Manny Turan.
And I'm Adam Hartung.
We are Spark Partners. We're here every week delivering lots of insights on trends and why they're so massively important to understand and use to grow your business. That second part is important, the and use part, because a lot of people, they talk trends, they listen to trends, they monitor trends, but then they don't do anything beyond that. There's no action. And love him or hate him, Elon Musk is a man of action. And there's something that happened here over the past week or two that was in the news. And that, of course, is a partnership between Tesla and Ford Motor Company. Ford is the top sixth largest automaker in the world. You've got Toyota, you've got VW, you've got, GM is up there as well, but they're pretty big. I mean, Ford's massive. So I wanted to start with that, Adam. And, we're talking about Tesla, who's got a very high market cap as it is. Their valuation is ridiculous. They're not making very many cars compared to Ford. So what's the benefit for them to go partner with the devil?
Okay. Well, the partnership was around the charging stations. And Tesla been in the marketplace for, I want to say 15, 16 years, I think now. And they went from a world in which you had to charge your vehicle at home. That was the only way you could charge your vehicle, to then people wanting to charge more remotely. And over time, they've built out a pretty darn big charging network spanning the United States, with urban areas having a lot of the Tesla stations. If you drive through Tucson, most towns, you won't have any difficulty finding the Tesla signs and the charging stations. So what happened is they're way out in front. If you look at the number of Tesla cars sold in the United States or sold in the world compared to anybody else, they've got multiple sold versus anybody else. Now here comes Ford with the biggest selling non-Tesla electric car, which is the Mustang Mach-E. That's the biggest selling outside of the Tesla vehicles. By the way, statistic a lot of people might have missed, but the Tesla Model Y was the number one most popular car sold in Q3.
Really? I didn't know that.
I got that wrong. No, Q1. I'm sorry, in Q1 of 2023. I said that wrong. So the quarter just ended, Q1 2023. The Model Y was the best-selling car in the world. So it wasn't just the best-selling electric car. It was the best-selling car in the world. So, here's this company, 15 years old in the car industry, which most of everybody at Ford and GM just laughed about 12 years ago. I remember when I first started writing about Tesla, they would just go to the people that were running Ford, and GM would write nasty, nasty letters to Forbes and say, that I didn't know what I was talking about. I wasn't a car expert. Then the Tesla would disappear. And, that turned out to be really wrong. But anyway, I digress back again to this story. There's all these Tesla cars out there. Tesla's put all these charging stations out there. So Tesla has this standard for the plug-in on the car for how you charge it, right? And so they just recently named it, and they trademarked the name North American Charging Station, NACS. So they trademarked their standard, North American Charging Standard. Sorry, I said that wrong. NACS. So they actually trademarked this, and they have this standard for how a charging station would work. So here comes Ford, and they're putting their Mach-E out, and they got their Lightning coming out. And, we've talked about that they're setting up two Fords. There's Ford Blue, and there's Ford E, and they're going to try to, make sure that they make the investments to grow the E business. But their car used the plug-in on it was a standard called CCS. And this was a standard developed by the government out of the regulatory agencies. And all the North American suppliers were headed towards this CCS. Well, there's people who pay a lot of attention to batteries and charging and how electronics work for these kinds of things. And the pretty much universal opinion of the agnostic folks out there, the people at universities and regulatory agencies, those kinds of things, was that the standard, the Tesla was a better standard, that it charged faster, it worked better, and it was just better than the CCS standard. But Tesla owned it, so they couldn't say, hey, let's go make this a national standard, because Tesla owns it. But you got Tesla, you got the cars, you got the charging stations, you got the standard. So what Ford did was they went in and said, look, we would like to make a partnership with you so that we will switch from the CCS standard to the NACS standard. And that means that anybody who buys any one of our electric cars can plug it into a Tesla station. And that was the partnership they made. So that I think is a really good deal. If you think about it, this is corny and it's not real good, and almost all analogies aren't real good, but kind of think about the Tesla car a little bit like an iPhone, okay? In that it's a platform that uses a lot of software and it has to be recharged and it's electronic and all those good things. So now what happened was they got this standard for how you would charge it. And they got these charging stations. Well, they make money on charging stations. If you drive up, plug in, that's that's going to cost you. You have to pay to do that. That's why most people charge their vehicles at home. That's by far and away the least expensive way to charge your vehicle. Well, now what they've been able to do is say, hey, everybody buys a Ford car. When they go to charge it in, we're going to make some money on it because they'll have to put the Tesla type system in their home to charge. We'll make a profit on that. Then if they come to our charging stations, we'll make a profit on that. So it's a little bit kind of like an
Well,
app.
is that the benefit for Tesla? Is that they get some additional revenue, or is there something beyond that?
I think for Tesla, it could turn into a huge win. And here's how. If, in fact, Ford is the first one of these companies that goes down this road, but it leads towards everybody else. Now, I don't know if you caught this, but about 2 months ago, approximately, they were trying to go out and implement the Inflation Reduction Act. It's got a lot of things in there that relate to electric cars. And there was a deal that got made between the federal government and Tesla to use Tesla charging stations nationwide on all vehicles. So the government reached in and said, look, we would like to tell people that if they buy electric cars, they could tap into your network. And the way you had to do that was, I believe you had to buy if your car wasn't a Tesla, you had to get an adapter, go through some things like an adapter or modifier to get this to work. But Tesla already made that deal, but it was a limited time deal. I think it's good for 1 or 2 years. But think about what happens if you now are Tesla and you get the NACS standard agreed upon by the industry. And now all of the electric vehicles that are manufactured by Ford, by General Motors, by I'm trying to remember now who owns Chrysler. It starts with an S. Style. Anyway, the company that owns Chrysler and Jeep. If you can get those companies, then down the road Toyota and Honda, if they do their electric cars to operate in the United States, what happens is now suddenly you are the standard. So now you get a fee. You would get a royalty from letting them use your technology in the car. You would get a fee for anybody who buys the charging stations, the charging hardware, to put it in their home or to put up a charging station. You would then be able to sell electricity through that, and you probably could make a little money on the sale of electricity, sort of like selling gasoline at a gas station. You could make some money on the throughput. So like I said, it kind of back to it, the charging stations become a little bit like an app that's flowing this money, and when people use it, it's like the app store, and money flows back to Tesla. And a lot of people haven't kind of thought this through, but the truth is we are going to put up 500,000 additional charging stations in the United States in something like the next 3 years. That's part of the Inflation Reduction Act, and they're being heavily subsidized by the federal government. There's 2 companies out there building charging stations today. Those are on CCS standards. They might go to a CCS and an NCAS standards, or we might be at the tip edge of a deal that they'll go, drop CCS and go NACS. But any circumstance in which it would include NACS or the Tesla standard for the build out of those 500,000 stations is a good thing for Tesla. They would make money, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's a good thing for the consumer as well. Because if you remember, I don't know if you're old enough, Manny, but when mobile phones first came along, if you bought your mobile phone and it was a Motorola mobile phone, then it ran on the Motorola network. And if you bought a phone from another maker and you bought it, say, from Verizon or one of the other suppliers, like Sprint, take, for example, if you bought a Sprint on a Sprint. So Sprint's network, AT&T's network, these different networks didn't talk to each other. So when you made a call, if you were calling they wanted you to call another Sprint customer. So all the ads would say, hey, get your friends and family plan going. Refer somebody, get them into the Sprint network. Because talking within your network was very low charge because they had control of costs. Cross-lateral crossing networks was more expensive. Well, eventually we got to where that wasn't a problem anymore. Now, you just call everybody and you don't even think about it. It could be Sprint, it could be AT&T, it could be an iPhone, it could be an Android phone. We don't think about that stuff anymore.
Yeah.
But that was sort of a little war that went on. It was about who's going to get the standard, how we're going to make this all work. And that's where I'm coming back and saying, from the user perspective, you don't want these problems. You don't want to have a Rivian, or is it Rivian or Rivian? I think it's Rivian. You don't want to have one
Rivian.
of these trucks. You don't want to have one of these trucks and it's got to have a special charging station. Or you don't want to have a truck and it's designed for one charging station, but you have to put an adapter on and maybe it takes 50% longer to charge your batteries up, or it takes extra time, or there's extra costs involved. You don't want those hassles. So from a consumer standpoint, if you're the federal government, you believe in you want a lower carbon in the atmosphere, then you're saying, I want more electric cars, then you would say, hey, I want to make it easy on the consumer. The vast majority of charging, again, occurs at home, but you don't want to be stuck. So just knowing that you're not stuck because there's one standard, I guess I take it back another one. I don't know that this ever happened, but if you could imagine back when the cars were being developed in the 20s and the early 30s, imagine that there was different gasoline. And,
Right.
if you bought a car that you had to go to the Shell station, or you had to go to the Exxon station, or you had to go to the Shamrock station, you had to go to a specific gas station to get your gasoline. That would have been a real hassle, right?
Right.
But, gasoline, I think pretty much gasoline was always gasoline, it's just different octane levels. And so people could go anywhere. That's what I think we're headed toward from the
Yeah, I think
consumer
everything's
point.
in that direction. I think, even with my iPhone here, this particular lightning plug is going to be replaced by a universal style charging, right? And same thing with Android, same thing with all the other phones that exist out there. And I think it's just part of the process. I think Tesla's getting a little bit of momentum, right? This, even talking about this in the news, is getting this advertised, right? What did Barnum and Bailey say? Any media is good media, right?
Right, right, right. And so I look at it and I say, I think this is good for consumers. So therefore, I think it's good for Ford, because Ford's trying to sell more vehicles. If Ford can say that, hey, you can use the Tesla stations, then that's going to help people who are saying comparing a Tesla and a Ford car. They'll be able to take a look and say, oh, well, then I can pick the car I like. And they might think that the Ford, which is a sportier car, in terms of its looks and performance. I mean, it's not sportier than the Model S with 4 motors on it. That's a crazy fast car. But you know what I'm getting at, right? Somebody
Yeah.
wants that car at that price point, then they would say, I don't have to worry about charging anymore, which I think is a good deal. And I got to tell you, it was interesting to me because about 3, 4 weeks ago, I got an email. And as you know, I've had a Mercedes S-Class for 10 years, and I don't drive a lot. It's only got about 65,000 miles on it. But I got a thing in the mail that Mercedes was doing a test drive of its electric cars, and they've got a new car out that's comparable to the S-Class S550.
Really?
Yeah, and they said, going to come test drive it, come over to this place, and we'll let you have a run. And I did, and I was really impressed with the car. It's actually throttle response was and speed and early torque and high end, all of it beat out my car, which it's 10 years old and it's a gas powered car. And I was like, oh, this is very, very impressive. I honestly can now say that without a doubt that when the car I have goes, I'm going to go electric. But I didn't even think at the time to ask about charging stations.
Right.
Didn't occur to me when I
Out of
did the test
curiosity,
drive.
what was the sticker on it?
Oh, 110. It was 110, which, by the way, was less than what my car was listed at back at 2010. So the gasoline powered version that I had was a more expensive car in 2010 dollars than this one is in 2023 dollars. So I was impressed. It adjusted for inflation, is a cheaper car. And again, just a super car. I really, really enjoyed it. The test drive I took, but I come back again. I haven't thought enough about this. I realized I wasn't a good consumer because I didn't even think about how would I charge it. What's the standard? What's it hook up to? So now it's one of the things that our audience ought to be listening to. I think the issue here, though, is to start to understand that whenever you're getting into these businesses, you have to kind of look at the infrastructure around you, and you have to say, what's that infrastructure and how do I fit? And I've seen an awful lot of small business people have tremendously good ideas, but they don't work on the existing infrastructure. It's kind of like an example. Back about 15 years ago, there was a big quick shop type of an organization that was called Quick Trip on the QT out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Had a lot of stores in the Southwest. And they came out with one of those big giant cups, the big 64-ounce cups that we drink whenever we get in that hot weather, right? And then, to make it substantial, the base of it was about, I don't know, 4.5, 5 inches in diameter. And so when you got the cup, it was substantial. But the problem was you couldn't put it in your cup holder. And so the product wasn't succeeding because it didn't fit in the cup holder in the car. Now they
Hmm.
modified that, and today, if you go get a big 64-ounce cup, it's a very unstable cup with this very small bottom and the big top. But they did that to make it fit into the car, into the cup
Right.
holder, right? That's an example of understanding the infrastructure and saying, okay, if I want to go sell something, what's the problem that it's going to fit into, right? If you have a new idea, but it requires your customer to make a significant investment, it's going to be a hard sell, right? You got
It's very
to think
true.
about that. Yeah, you got to think about when you go in. Am I asking, how much am I asking of my customer whenever I am asking them to buy my product? And if it doesn't require them to invest a lot, then it's a lot easier for them to do the test. And that's one of the things that a lot of times our companies, our small mid-sized companies, don't think through. They say, well, I've got this, it's a far superior solution. Okay, yeah, but you're asking a lot of the customer. They got to change, maybe they got to change their business process, in some way. Or maybe they have to change their interaction with their customer in some way. And again, that's what gets in the way of a company like a Ford. If one of the problems Ford's having with this transition is that when you sell a gasoline car, a dealer out there, he can sell that car, and I'm told that dealers don't make a lot on selling a new car. But what they do make a lot on is you come back in for your warranty checkups to keep your
Right.
warranty good. Those are oil changes. They can check out your brakes and things, see if you need additional service, and they try to get you, come in to us for your service. Don't go to somebody else, and then they can make money on the service over time. That's a great business model until you sell an electric car. Because electric cars just don't need the service, right? There's
Right.
no oil changes, no transmission fluids. The brakes last nearly forever because you've got regenerative braking, meaning the motor's doing the braking. So all these wear parts that we have in our cars, there's so many fewer of them in an electric. So if you're a dealer, now you're looking at a very different set of economics.
Yeah.
It's like, I
You're
got to
gonna have
make
to
money
change the
selling
way you
my
do
car.
business. Yeah.
Yeah. And Tesla doesn't have dealers. Tesla owns its sales force, right? It owns its facilities. And so consequently, it's not having to pay a profit at that point in the supply chain when it goes to the customer. Here you've got Ford making a car. It has to make a profit selling it to the dealer, and the dealer has to make a profit selling it to the end user. And they got around that in the past with the service. Now they're not going to have that service revenue that they can
Right.
count upon.
When was
So
the
what
last time you
happened?
bought a printer, by the way?
Sorry?
When was the last time you bought a printer?
About a year ago. I'm looking, okay, I'm looking at it.
How much was
Why?
it? A couple $100?
Um, I bought one. It was about $400, and I print a lot of black and white stuff, a lot of black and white stuff, related to my business and Mary Lou's business. And so I got something that I could print a lot of black and white stuff.
Yeah.
And instead of using ink, it doesn't use ink. It uses a toner, that kind of
Yeah.
good
So
stuff.
if you think about that business model, I mean, they probably don't make much money on the sale of the printer, right? They're probably just
Right.
breaking even at best. I mean, I bought a printer the other day for $100,
Yep.
but the damn toner, the damn ink, it cost me a fortune.
Yeah.
40
Yeah.
bucks for a
Right.
small thing that lasts probably like 2 or 3 months, right? So
Right.
I think that's an example of an industry that went out and said, you know what, we're not going to require you to put a big up front, but we're going to require you to pay the piper every time you use the product.
Yeah. So again, I encourage our audience out there to think about when you're coming up with a new idea for a business, what is the ask on your customer? How much are you asking them to make an investment in doing something different? And realize that they probably don't want to make a change, right? Now, sometimes that's where trends are really, really helpful because if you can go to the customer and say, "Look, I know this is your business, I know how it works, but let's look at the world, okay? We got this, for example, years ago, you go and say, I know you've got a telephone. I know you got a traditional phone system in your business, landline phone, landline, everything operational, fax machine, all that stuff. But you can walk in and say, look at all the people using cell phones. Look where this is headed. Long term, we know that's not going to happen. And so long term, you're going to get rid of that old part of the infrastructure. You're going to replace it. Think of my product as helping you move in that direction. So the one way to get around this problem of having some further investment in infrastructure or asking someone to change is to say, is the world changing? What is happening in terms of trends? If the trend is towards mobile phones, and that's how people are working, then what you can say is, look, you're going to end up with this mobile phone in your business as well as a mobile phone in your personal life. Let's start talking about how to use that today. So to overcome the stick in the mud, I'm here, I don't want to change phenomenon, that's where you come in and you can use trends, right, to try to promote that new form of behavior.
Yeah, I think people need to, for those that are new to this show or those that are relatively new to the whole idea of trends, The reason we talk about trends so much is because it comes down to where is the market going. If you come out right now and you're trying to sell something that the market's already passed it, like the whole Wayne Gretzky thing, right? He goes skates to where the puck is going, not where it is. You're not going to have that wild success. You're going to have marginal success at best.
Yeah.
But if you look forward, trends tells you where the market is going to be, so that when you actually develop your product or service, that you're reaching it when the market gets there. And I think that, love him or hate him, Elon Musk and his executives are making some pretty bold moves. And you're seeing that over and over again in different other areas, and even his other businesses, right? The SpaceX and the Boring Company. I mean, he's making partnerships with lots of organizations, and I think it speaks to his strategic mind, and I think there's a lot of value in understanding why he does what he does.
So 20 years ago, when I did some work with Motorola, and at that time, Motorola was big because they had the Razr phone, and it was very successful. They had the infrastructure towers that they were operating for the cellular phones, but they also had a really big radio business. Remember the police walkie-talkie type radios that they used, the firemen, and also if you went, say, to a casino or to an event, if you went to an event, like one of those big centers that you would have an event in, you saw these security people and folks using these two-way radios, right? And even 20 years ago, those radios were all analog technology. And analog technology has certain benefits, especially if you're near range with someone. But what happened was, and Motorola saying, look, we've got digital technology that can overcome all the downsides, and like it's analog plus, it's better. But they couldn't get their dealers to move in that direction because the dealers, all their service people were analog oriented. They'd already sold lots of equipment to the fire departments and the police stations, all those guys, plus the event organizers. They'd already sold a lot of stuff, and they were just adding on to what they already had. And Motorola was trying to say, look, you need to start switching to digital, switch to digital. And I got involved with them. I actually ended up going around to doing a dozen different events where we brought in all the dealers. And what I explained to them was, look, you're not going to get out of digital in 1 week, right? But out of analog. But here's the digital product. Here's the analog product. When you've got a customer who wants an analog product, sell them the analog product. That's what they want. But introduce them to the digital product. Introduce them to the technology. Talk about its benefits. Let the customer decide which one they want. When you know that the digital is superior, point out how the digital is superior. And then point out to them how the digital will replace the analog over the course of the next 5 years. So the more they keep buying analog product, they're buying something that's going into a dying technology. So they need to be thinking, the customer needs to be thinking about how they switch from analog to digital. And so that whole purpose was to say that it's not a one-shot deal. In other words, if you're working with a customer, do you force them to buy the new technology or not? And so that's kind of like where we are with Ford. You can go in and you can still buy a normal pickup with a gas engine or a diesel engine, but they're starting to make available the electric engine. So that's going to put the dealer in a position saying, look, which do you want? You want to keep investing in gasoline technology, diesel technology, when you know that nobody's doing additional R&D there. They're not trying to improve performance because all the R&D and improvements on the electric side. But maybe that's what you want because it's convenient, it's easy. You know where the gas stations are. You're comfortable fixing your own vehicle. Whatever reason, that's what you want. But hey, let me introduce you to the new solution. Let me introduce you to the new technology, and then let's look at the trend. Here's a Tesla. Look how many cars they've sold in the U.S. Look how many they sold in China. Look at number one car for Q1 2023. Maybe you should think about the electric vehicle. And if you don't buy it today, that's okay. But we don't do enough of that, helping people. How do I get across that bridge? What is it I'm buying today, and then how do I buy something new? And realizing that the people who are going to buy it today are people with an unmet need, some kind of an unmet need. So, for example, another piece of this. When the Toyota Prius came out, the Prius was more expensive than a gasoline-powered car. And so the people thought, well, why would someone want to buy this thing, right? It's electric, it's a hybrid, that kind of thing. And we discovered that a lot of college kids were asking for them, and a lot of graduate students, and so we started digging into it. And what we learned was that their parents would say, hey, look, you're going off to college, let me get you a new car. And they would sit there and say, okay, what car do I want? Well, the economics, people do all these economics saying that you should just buy a gasoline-powered car because over time that high premium you pay for the hybrid isn't worth it. But to the college kid, he sat down and said, if I get this electric car, I can plug it in to a 110 outlet at night near my dorm, And basically, my operating costs go to zero. No oil changes, all the service things go away, and I'll be having this electric car, and my cost of operation will be near zero. So they were effectively saying, my need is a low cost of operating car when somebody else is putting up the capital. And that was what happened. And so the Prius became an extraordinarily popular car. So you have to look at this from the customer's point of view and start saying, who's the customer that would get advantaged by using this product, right? How is that going to work out the best? And that was what I kept telling Motorola with the radios is find the applications where the digital technology outperforms the analog and sell into that application. That's where the needs of the analog technology are poorly meeting the customer's needs. When you say, it's not just, don't just say it's a great product. Don't just say it's really cool or easy to use. Start saying, how does the customer benefit when they use this product, right? Yeah. That's your value proposition, right? Our value proposition is you get this win. So what's the win? It's when you better meet a poorly met or an unmet need. So how can I take that product out there and take advantage of that? And that's what we see happening now is we got people, who's going to buy the first electric trucks? And in a lot of cases, these electric trucks are not going to people who are going to use them in traditional, let's say, farming applications, construction applications, but people that really like the performance of the electric truck, right? Yeah. That's one thing, because it does have a much higher performance characteristic because of the electric motors. And the second one is, can I get the power at low to no cost? And then it's kind of like, okay, if I can go get this truck in my business, it becomes something that I can depreciate as part of my business. So I can lower the overhead cost, the purchase cost. And then if the electric costs are very low, the economics really work for me really, really well. So that's where you start targeting in on who would be the early buyer for, say, the electric truck. And that's, again, where we need our listeners should be paying a lot of attention is, do I really know how my customers benefit from using my product and from using my innovations? Because it's not just, gee, that's gee whiz. It's actually, here's the benefit you get from working with this. You're going to make better decisions. It's going to shorten your cycle time. Mm-hmm. It's going to allow you to be more responsive to your customers. We eliminate a problem that you have, like, that you have a job that somebody's doing something and you have a lot of turnover in that job because it's an undesirable job. We eliminate that job so that you don't have to deal with all that turnover and that undesirable job. Do you really know what the benefit is that the customers get?
Yeah, and I think it comes down to that conversation with your customer. I think a lot of salespeople and even the executives that make the decision on what a company builds make the wrong decision because they're listening to their customer through their own bias. And we've talked about bias a lot of times in this on this podcast. And I think the idea, Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm, the early adopters, are going to give you a lot of information based on the interaction and communication with them to help you go to that next realm and create some massive momentum. It reminds me of,
I think Ford was smart with the partnership with Tesla, back to where we started this conversation. I think that they're sitting there saying, okay, do we want to see ourselves at war with Tesla in a fight for market share and then have two standards out there and our customers have to live with us fighting that war out, which is like, Apple versus Microsoft. It's, Sprint versus AT&T. Do I want to be in that boat? Or can I go out and say to my customer, hey, if you buy this, you can use all the Tesla charging stations? That's thinking about the customer. And now what happens is, instead of dealing with that infrastructure problem that the customer would have to deal with, you're like, okay, now let's start comparing. Can you get another small, light-duty electric truck today? No, there isn't one. Tesla doesn't have one. I have one. It's called an F-150 Lightning. Let's talk about the benefits of that, right? So it puts you in that position. You've gotten past that infrastructure question. You've gotten past the range anxiety fears. All those things can go away, and you can really try to help the customer realize why they want to get on the trend towards the electric truck.
A lot of exciting information, Adam, and I'm glad we're having this discussion. And if you're a business that's looking at partnering to grow, or if you're looking at what trends are coming down the road, I invite you to reach out to us. We love doing this. We do this for lots of customers. Manny at sparkpartners.com and Adam at sparkpartners.com. And certainly we'd love to have your questions and thoughts. And with that, any final comments before we log off for today, Adam?
Again, I think a lot of times as small business people, we have an innovation, we get excited about it, and we think we have to sell it. And one of the roles that we play, Manny, is that you come to us, we will actually ask that hard question, what's in it for the customer, and help you figure out what's in it for the customer. When you figure out, hey, my value proposition is, and it's a powerful value proposition, and you can identify those customers with poorly met needs, it will sell. You don't have to go force it. It will sell. So a lot of times it's not a lack of sales force. It's not a lack of effort. It's that you haven't really done the targeting right yet. You don't really know your value proposition. And we can come at it with an outside view and really help you get that figured out and position you for success.
Absolutely. And one of the things we're going to be doing this summer is we're going to be having some guests over that have businesses that are either on trend or not. And we're going to come in and help them to understand really how to grow their business and do some of these live kind of interactive situations. So with that, Adam, we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you, Manny.
Cheers.